Jack Reacher was walking. That was his business, walking, seeing what there was to see, going where there was to go. This time, the road had taken him to the dusty, sun-baked landscape of West Texas, a place that felt more like a forgotten border outpost than a functioning part of the American infrastructure. He hadn't stopped for any reason. No blues musician's grave, no nostalgic military base. He just needed to stretch his legs, and Texas had a lot of legs. He was sitting on the porch of a ramshackle general store in a town called Redemption Creek, drinking a black coffee that tasted like burned tires and regret. He was watching the heat shimmer on the asphalt, the kind of heat that could kill a man if he stood still for too long. A battered pickup truck, ancient but meticulously maintained, pulled up, kicking up a small cloud of ochre dust that settled almost immediately. A woman climbed out. She was mid-50s, small, wiry, with eyes that had seen too much desert sun and too much life. She moved with a practiced economy that Reacher recognized as a sign of someone who couldn't afford wasted motion. She looked at Reacher, a long, assessing look, and then walked past him into the store. Reacher watched her go, then went back to his terrible coffee. She came out 5 minutes later, carrying a single, unmarked brown grocery bag. She stopped by the porch railing, looking out at the endless horizon. "You're a long way from anywhere, big man," she said, her voice dry as the desert air. Reacher took a measured sip of his coffee. "Everywhere is nowhere to a drifter." She gave a short, humorless laugh. "Drifter, that's a gentle word for what you are." She looked directly at him, the desert sun in her eyes. "I know who you are, or what you do. I know the kind of mess that follows you around." Reacher set his cup down. The clink of ceramic on wood sounded loud in the silence. "Then you know I'm not looking for trouble." "Trouble doesn't ask permission," she countered. She nodded toward a small framed photo sitting near the store's cash register inside. Reacher had registered it earlier, a young man in a university graduation gown, smiling, full of unrealized potential. "That was my son Mateo." Reacher waited. He was working his way through college, clean as a whistle, saved up to buy a small courier business, running supplies down near the border. Her voice cracked, but she caught it, flattening the emotion back into the dryness of the air. 6 weeks ago, he was found in a ditch 50 miles south of here, shot, twice in the chest, execution style, and they took the truck. "Bad place to run a business," Reacher said. He wasn't offering sympathy, he was offering a fact. It wasn't a robbery, the money was still in his pocket, it was a message. She stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. Mateo saw something he shouldn't have seen. He ran his route every Tuesday. He saw a crew moving product, not just a drop, but a whole operation. He kept quiet, but the jefe didn't take chances. The local sheriff called it a botched carjacking, said he'd look into it. 6 weeks. Nothing. Reacher's internal clock started ticking, measuring the time until she got to the point. "I tracked the truck," she said. "GPS tracker I put on it for insurance. It's sitting in a warehouse compound 40 miles from here. Belongs to a man named Hector El Martillo Ramos. He's the local muscle for the Soto Cartel. They call him the Hammer. He took my son's life and his livelihood. He made it personal." She reached into her bag and pulled out a worn manila envelope, passing it to Reacher. It was thin. Reacher opened it. Inside were 2 items. A high-resolution printout of an overhead satellite image showing a massive isolated warehouse complex and a single heavy-caliber .45 ACP round. "I'm an old woman with nothing left to lose but my own life. I'd go in there myself, but I know better. I can't kill a cartel lieutenant and his security detail. But you..." She trailed off, leaving the rest hanging in the dry air. Reacher looked at the photo of Mateo, then at the .45 round. He picked up the bullet. It was a solid copper jacket, meticulously cleaned. "The police should handle this." "The police are handling it," she said, her voice pure ice. "By not interfering with El Martillo's business. They're bought and paid for. The jefe took my son. I want the Hammer's head, and the whole structure that supports it. I need a cleaning crew, not a cop." Reacher considered her. She wasn't asking him to move a mountain. She was asking him to put a target on his own back for a stranger. But the truth was, he was bored. And a good-looking injustice was always a powerful motivator. A young man, killed just because he was in the wrong place at the wrong time, his mother left with nothing but a photo and a stolen truck. It was a small-scale outrage, the kind that got lost in the noise of the world. He stood up. He was 6'5" and 250 pounds of dense, mostly muscle. He filled the doorway. "The truck is proof," he said. "You get it back, you have leverage. You can go to the feds." "I don't want leverage. I want justice. The Reacher kind." She didn't blink. "And the truck is a decoy. It's what lured my son. It's tainted. Burn it. Burn the whole damn place down. I want the Jefe to know this wasn't an accident. I want him to know someone came for the hammer." Reacher picked up his coffee cup and drained the dregs. The bitter taste was fitting. He dropped the .45 round back into the envelope and handed it back to her. "I don't take payment. I don't take orders. But I see what I see. Where's the compound?" She reached into the envelope, pulled out the satellite photo, and turned it over. Scrawled on the back was a single line of coordinates and a hand-drawn map. "North of the river bend, old gravel pit. They used the empty lot for the transfer." "I'll need to see it first," Reacher said. He looked at the vast, empty space beyond the store. "And I'll need a lift." She drove him in the battered pickup 20 miles down a sun-baked blacktop, then turned onto a dirt track that hadn't seen a grader in a decade. The dust was thick, billowing behind them like a warning signal. The compound was exactly as it looked on the satellite photo, an isolated fortress of corrugated steel and chain-link fence topped with razor wire, sitting in the middle of nowhere. It consisted of 2 massive warehouses and a smaller, prefabricated office building, all enclosed by the fence. There was a gate, heavily reinforced, and a guard tower. The place reeked of illegality, the kind of operation that thrived on isolation. Reacher used a pair of cheap binoculars he'd liberated from the general store, a $1.99 special. He scanned the perimeter. 2 men on the gate, carrying what looked like AK-47 variants, bored but watchful. 1 man in the tower with a hunting rifle, scanning the perimeter with the slow, rhythmic sweep of a man who didn't expect to see anything but heat and scrub. "The truck," the woman whispered, pointing. Reacher adjusted the focus. Tucked behind the second warehouse, partially obscured, was a small white box truck. The dimensions matched the photo of Mateo's courier vehicle. It was a clear staging area. "How many inside?" Reacher asked. "Ramos keeps about 8 men on site, total. 2 shifts. The big transports happen at night. That's when the Jefe's product comes in. They run it through the warehouses, repack it, then ship it out on regular trucks to different cities." Reacher cataloged the information. At least 8 men, shift changes, heavy weapons. He looked at the fences. Not electrified, but the wire was thick. 1 way in, 1 way out. Not a problem. He didn't need to use the gate. "Where is Ramos?" "The office building, always. He likes to watch his money move." Reacher lowered the binoculars. The silence of the desert pressed in. He gave the woman a look that told her their association was over. "Go home. Don't wait up." "What about the truck?" she asked, a spark of something Reacher didn't recognize. Anger, maybe, or simple greed, flashing in her eyes. "It stays put. I told you, I'm cleaning house, not running a salvage operation." Reacher didn't like her sudden change in tone, the way the death of her son seemed to compete with the desire for absolute destruction. But it didn't matter. The situation was rotten. Reacher only dealt with rotten. He got out of the truck, taking nothing but the clothes on his back and the knowledge in his head. He watched her drive away, the dust cloud following her like a guilty conscience. Then he turned and melted into the scrub, heading for the south perimeter. The sun was sinking, painting the sky in a lurid palette of orange and crimson. The transition from day to night in the desert was quick, brutal. Reacher waited, motionless, behind a low rise of dried earth and thorn bushes. letting the temperature drop and the shadows lengthen. Waiting was a skill, one he had mastered in a previous life. He listened to the insects, the rustle of dry weeds, and the slow, heavy beat of his own heart. He moved an hour after full dark, when the lights of the compound cast long, sharp shadows and the guards were settling into the dull monotony of the night shift. He stayed low, using the scattered rocks and dry vegetation for cover. The guard tower presented the first problem. The guy in it had a decent field of view. Reacher circled around, coming at the fence from a dead angle against the warehouse. He was close enough to smell the dust and the faint chemical odor of stored goods. He reached the fence. The chain link was taut, the diamonds small and unforgiving. He took hold of the wire, putting his weight into it, his fingers searching for a weakness. He found a spot near the bottom where the mesh was pulled slightly loose from the supporting pole. He didn't use a tool. He used leverage, muscle, and calculated force, the kind that comes from 250 pounds of determined density. He pulled and twisted, bending the wire until the gap was just wide enough for him to squeeze through. It took less than 30 seconds and made only a faint scraping sound, swallowed by the general ambient noise of the desert night. Inside, the compound felt tighter, the air heavy with industrial grime and the suppressed tension of illegal activity. Reacher stayed in the shadows thrown by the warehouse. His immediate objective was the guard tower. He moved silently, one foot in front of the other, each step considered and quiet. He reached the base of the tower. It was a simple structure, metal scaffolding with a wooden cabin on top. Reacher started to climb, using the bracing struts and supports, moving like a large, agile cat. He used his bulk to maintain silence, pressing against the metal to dampen any vibration. He reached the cabin floor. The guard inside was leaning against the railing, smoking a cigarette, his rifle resting against the wall. He was staring out into the dark. Reacher waited for the exhalation of smoke. For the moment his attention was focused on the far horizon. Reacher launched himself over the low railing, moving with impossible speed. His left arm snaked out, a huge fist closing around the guard's mouth, cutting off any sound. His right hand locked around the guard's neck, the famous Reacher grip, clamping down on the carotid artery. The guard's eyes widened in brief, terrified comprehension. He struggled for a moment, a pathetic twitching of his body. The cigarette fell to the floor. Then, darkness took him. Reacher eased him to the floor, checked his pulse, nothing, and grabbed the rifle. It was a decent Russian-made Kalashnikov, not high-tech, but reliable. Reacher didn't like rifles. Too much noise, too much distance, but it was a tool. He checked the magazine. Full. He slung it across his back. 2 down, not counting the 2 on the gate, who would be next. Reacher looked down at the gate from the tower. 2 figures, standing side by side, sharing a joke, oblivious. Reacher took a deep breath. He climbed down, moving even faster now. He didn't need to be silent anymore. He was past the point of no return. He walked toward the gate, staying close to the shadow of the fence. He was 40 yards out when one of the guards finally saw him, a massive shape detaching itself from the dark periphery. "Hey!" the guard shouted, raising his rifle. Reacher didn't stop. The guard fired. The sound was deafening, a sharp, flat crack that echoed off the steel warehouses. The round zipped past Reacher's shoulder, a near miss. Amateur. Reacher closed the distance in a blur. The second guard was slow, fumbling with his weapon. The first guard managed to get a second shot off, but Reacher was already on him. He slammed his left forearm into the guard's rifle, knocking it high, and then his right fist connected with the guard's jaw. It was a short, sharp, brutal blow, all 250 pounds of Reacher's coiled weight behind it. The guard's head snapped back, a sickening sound, and he dropped. The second guard was finally ready, his rifle leveled. Reacher didn't hesitate. He took 2 long strides, kicked the rifle out of the guard's hands. The weapon skittered across the pavement, and then drove a knee into the guard's solar plexus. The man folded in on himself, wheezing, the air knocked out of him. Reacher finished him with a short, controlled chop to the base of the neck. 5 seconds, maybe 6. Both guards were down, out of the fight permanently. The shots had done their job. They had announced his arrival. Lights were coming on in the prefab office building. Doors were opening in the warehouses. The remaining cartel members were scrambling. Reacher checked the two bodies, confirming they were dead. No point leaving a witness to tell the tale. He grabbed the other rifle. Now he had two, which was overkill, but useful for one thing: intimidation and suppression. He walked toward the office building. It was a flimsy structure, 2 stories of glass and composite paneling, not built for a siege, the perfect place for a coward like Ramos to hide. 4 men emerged from the first warehouse, running toward the gate, attracted by the noise. They were carrying pistols and sawed-off shotguns. They were professionals, but not Reacher level. They were organized criminals. Reacher was chaos incarnate. He dropped one of the captured AK-47s to the ground and leveled the other. He didn't aim for the chest. Chests had vests. He aimed for the legs, the knees, the hip joints, places that would stop them cold and make them a liability to their friends. He fired 3 short, controlled bursts. Clack, clack, clack. The sound was dry and explosive. 3 men dropped, one screaming, clutching a shattered femur, another howling as buckshot tore into his kneecap. The 4th man froze, his eyes wide in the dark, unable to process the speed and accuracy of the attack. Reacher tossed the now empty rifle, letting it clatter on the concrete. He walked toward the remaining thug, a large man with a thick neck. "Where is Ramos?" Reacher asked, his voice low, a monotone of controlled violence. The man stammered, pulling the trigger on his pistol. The shot went wide, hitting the pavement near Reacher's foot. The man was too scared to aim. Reacher stepped in, catching the man's wrist in a vice-like grip. He twisted, heard a sickening snap, the radius and ulna breaking, and the man screamed, dropping the pistol. Reacher drove a massive elbow into the man's face. Cartilage shattered. The man went down, unconscious before he hit the ground. Total tally: 6 down, 3 dead, 3 seriously wounded, 1 unconscious. That left Ramos and maybe 2 others, probably hiding in the office or the second warehouse. Reacher didn't waste time on the wounded. He moved to the office building. A single man, better dressed than the rest, was standing in the doorway, a chrome-plated pistol in his hand. He was trying to look tough, but his eyes were darting everywhere. "Stop!" the man yelled, his voice strained. "Who are you? You have no idea who you are messing with." "This is the Soto Cartel." Reacher paused, giving the man a chance to understand the mistake he had made. "I'm not messing with the Soto Cartel. The Soto Cartel messed with a mother's son, and now they mess with me." The man fired. Reacher moved. It wasn't a duck or a dodge. It was a simple, subtle shift of his center of gravity, a micro-adjustment in his posture that moved his body out of the bullet's path. The bullet went past his ear. Reacher closed the gap in 3 strides, a human locomotive gaining speed. The man was panicking, trying to chamber another round. Reacher didn't let him. Reacher punched him in the throat. Not with a closed fist, but with a stiff, powerful finger jab, a move he hadn't used since his MP days. It crushed the man's larynx, silencing him instantly. The man dropped the pistol and fell, suffocating on his own damaged windpipe. Inside the office, it was a mess of cheap furniture, computer monitors, and scattered paperwork. Reacher found what he was looking for on the 2nd floor, the executive suite. The door was locked, badly locked by an office lock, not a safe room lock. "Ramos!" Reacher called out. His voice was calm, but it filled the small space. "Your ride's here. I'm giving you 5 seconds to open the door." Silence from the room. A different kind of silence this time, one of pure, unadulterated fear. Reacher didn't wait for the countdown. He kicked the door. Not a fancy movie kick, just a massive size 12 boot, right next to the lock. The plywood door frame splintered, the door bursting inward with a loud crash. The room was large, dominated by a heavy oak desk and a wall of glass looking out over the compound. Hector El Martillo Ramos, a barrel of a man with expensive clothes and nervous sweat beading on his forehead, was standing behind the desk. He had a small, silver-plated derringer clutched in a shaking hand. "Don't come any closer, man," Ramos squeaked, his voice nothing like the hard man title of The Hammer suggested. He was a fat toad, not a hammer. "You killed a kid named Mateo," Reacher stated, walking into the room. He walked slowly, deliberately, forcing Ramos to watch him approach. He saw a shipment. You killed him and took his truck to send a message. I don't know any kid. Ramos stammered, his eyes huge. I kill lots of people. I'm a professional. You're making a mistake. I'm El Martillo. The Jefe will come for you. He'll have to get in line, Reacher said. He reached the desk. He looked down at the pathetic little pistol Ramos was waving. The truck is outside, Reacher continued, ignoring the threat. The white one, the one Mateo worked for, the one you stole. Take it, Ramos shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. Take the truck, take the money. I have cash, $1 million in the safe. Take it and go. Reacher didn't look at the small, reinforced safe door in the corner. He only looked at Ramos. The mother of the boy gave me a souvenir, a bullet. She wants justice. She wants you to know this wasn't random. This was personal. Ramos fired the Derringer. The bullet, a small .22 caliber round, was weak and inaccurate. It hit the corner of the oak desk, sending up a splinter of wood. Reacher was already moving. He reached across the desk, his hand moving like a striking snake. He grabbed Ramos by the wrist, squeezing until the delicate bones ground against each other. The Derringer dropped to the thick carpet. Ramos screamed, a high-pitched, pathetic sound that was swallowed by the thick walls. Reacher lifted the man over the desk with a grunt of effort, dropping him heavily onto the floor. Ramos lay there, gasping, trying to crawl away. Reacher stood over him, a mountain of quiet fury. You took his life, Reacher said, his voice quiet, almost a whisper. You sent a message, now I'm sending one back. He didn't need a weapon. Ramos was a soft target, terrified and broken. Reacher knelt, grabbed the man's shirt, and hauled him to a seated position. Ramos was weeping, begging, a stream of useless Spanish and broken English. Reacher ignored the noise. He found the point behind Ramos's ear, a spot where the temporal artery lay exposed, and brought the heel of his massive hand down in a short, powerful arc. It wasn't a killing blow, not yet. It was a stunner, a reset. Ramos slumped, unconscious, but still breathing. Reacher stood up. He walked to the window, looking out over the compound. The wounded were still moaning. The dark was quiet now, except for the sounds of a disaster. He walked to the desk, opened a drawer, and found a bottle of high-proof liquor, probably tequila. He took a sip, smooth, hot, and tasteless. He grabbed a box of matches next to it. Reacher walked back downstairs. He ignored the man he had silenced in the doorway. He went to the first warehouse. It was mostly empty, but large crates labeled machine parts were stacked high. Reacher sniffed the air. Not machine parts. Acetone, diesel, and something vaguely floral. The smell of high-grade narcotics, carefully disguised. He took the bottle of tequila and smashed it against the floor, letting the spirit run in a line toward the nearest stack of crates. He lit a match, watching the small flame burn down to his fingers, then dropped it. The line of liquor caught fire, a bright, cheerful blue flame crawling across the floor. It reached the crates and licked upward. The cardboard and wood caught quickly, feeding the fire. The chemical smell intensified, a sharp, unpleasant odor that would travel for miles. Reacher didn't watch it burn. He walked to the second warehouse, the one with Mateo's truck. He repeated the process, focusing on the large containers near the truck. He didn't want the truck to survive. He wanted the mother's order followed to the letter, complete destruction. The second fire was hotter, fueled by a different collection of solvents. The flames were orange and yellow, already reaching for the corrugated steel roof. Reacher walked back to the office building. He climbed the stairs and went into Ramos's office. Ramos was still unconscious on the floor. Reacher looked at the expensive wall of glass. He walked to the window, picked up the sturdy oak chair near the desk, and hurled it through the glass. The air pressure changed immediately, the flames outside now audible, a loud, roaring sound. He grabbed the unconscious Ramos, hauling his heavy body over his shoulder like a sack of concrete. He walked to the massive hole in the wall. The fires were raging now, 2 towers of inferno visible for 50 miles. The chemical stench was overwhelming. Reacher held Ramos out the window, dangling him by his ankles. The man was still out, a dead weight. The fire below was intense, a furnace of burning crime. Reacher yelled into the desert night, his voice carrying over the roar of the fire. El Martillo sends his regards. He made it personal. He let go. The scream was cut short by the fire. The sound was swallowed, replaced by the crackling roar and the crashing of glass as the office windows blew out from the heat. Reacher stood there for a moment, watching the inferno. He was covered in sweat, dust, and a fine layer of soot. He listened to the sirens in the distance, a faint, growing wail. The local police, finally mobilized, or maybe a federal response, drawn by the plumes of smoke that were reaching for the stars. It didn't matter. He was a professional. His job was done. He took one last look at the scene. 2 massive burning structures, a few scattered bodies, and a compound reduced to a bonfire. The flames were a beacon, a signal to the Soto Cartel that their operation was finished here and that the man who did it was untouchable. He turned and walked away from the light and the noise, disappearing back into the immense, indifferent darkness of the Texas desert. He had a long walk ahead of him, and he liked to walk. He knew the mother of the dead boy would read the local news. She would know. That was enough. The score was settled, the ledger balanced. He was a drifter. He had nowhere to be, and all the time in the world to get there.